Okay. So I think there's definitely a theme that's standing out tonight. Joel mentioned it with, suffering is in our perception of the facts, which is a big deal because who controls our perception of the facts?
Yeah.
So who controls how much we ever suffer in anything? Absolutely. But what a tremendous power has been placed in our hands. Yet how few of us take that ability for granted, the ability to develop that ability. That's the master ability, to be able to change your perception of anything in a way that serves you, right? Recontextualization is another term for it. And that's largely what I do all day long with people is I just take a disempowering thought, belief, or mindset and shift it to something empowering, and that's it. And then all of a sudden, the mental suffering and the physical suffering goes away. Physical suffering because mental stress becomes physical stress. Your psychology becomes your physiology, right? So I want to throw a bunch of questions out there just to get the ball rolling with this. And just be able to give people a chance to share them. Let's just have a group discussion. We'll just go around the circle and just people share their thoughts. So I'm going to put a question out there. How can the way we think about our problems be the problem? How can the way we think about our problems be the problem? And then whoever wants to share, you can. You don't have to answer on anything. This is just open to everybody. Okay, anyone have any thoughts?
I'm totally the poster boy for that.
Tell us what you mean, Chris.
Well, what I've been doing to myself for the past few months at least, if not since January, is how I've been perceiving everything, being stuck, being a victim, things not changing, me feeling that I cannot change things. So as I constantly feed that story, it gets bigger, stronger, and more grooved in more. Brendan, can you help me out with that? It's more.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. You're wiring yourself for it.
Yes, and then you're living that wiring constantly. You ever watch that TV series Lucifer, and when people get stuck in their own hell loops and guilt? It's pretty much that. You're living your own hell that you have created for yourself until you can figure out what you're feeling guilty about or feeling badly about and fixing that.
And there's a line that I think Dr. Norman Doidge said it once at a seminar I went to. He's a brain expert. Thoughts that fire together, wire together. So when you start to experience challenge and you think, why is it always me? Or, how can this get worse and blah, blah, blah.
Right.
Then it gets wired, man. And then your suffering gets wired into your experiences.
But what also becomes difficult part of it is that as you start to leave that orbit and try to leave that, the habitual statements or the habitual slogans still come in. So now when they come in, you have to rewire them or give them different meaning or just understand that that's no longer where you're at.
Mm-hmm.
So eventually, at some point, you give yourself permission that this story arc has run its course and it's time to move on to a new story.
Mm-hmm. Love it. Great share. Great share. Who else has some thoughts on this? And first of all, I can't let you humbly share your experience with doing that the wrong way without saying that I've done far worse, man. So, none of us are any better than you. In fact, if anything, you're more valuable for your extreme self-honesty and humility in the moment. So thank you for sharing that.
I appreciate that. That means I have to up my game, clearly.
It's better to have the mindset that I need to up my game than have the mindset that I need to prove how good I am.
Mm-hmm.
It's better to think there's more to learn than think there's more to prove. Right?
And that was kind of when you're talking about doing right versus being right.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. Anyone else have any thoughts? And I'm leaving this completely open-ended. You can take it in any direction you want. How can the way we think about our problems be the problem?
So there's also a saying like, when you're a hammer, everything else is a nail, you know, and you start to see things through that lens. So by thinking about it, you're only bringing in your own thinking and you're not allowing for other perceptions, and you're viewing everything through that specific lens. Oh, I'm a hammer, so this is a nail, this is a nail, this is a nail. You're not letting anything be anything different.
Yes. So you can actually create a filter for reality. And if that's a disempowering filter, you've got a disempowering reality. That is quite an ever deepening hell to put yourself into now, isn't it? That's what leads to things like suicide and escapism and self-sabotage. The ever deepening hell, which is a side effect of a poor operating method for handling adversity, where your adversities make you weaker, not stronger. Right?
And you're the one assigning that meaning.
And that's the beautiful thing about it, is that focus creates reality for the individual. So we can create whatever meaning we want for whatever we want, but to be strategic about it and to do it with intention and just say, hey, look, I'm not playing in the game of life like a chess master till I plan my moves. When something bad happens, I'm going to handle it this way. Every single bad thing. And actually, I got a really funny story about this lake here today, and me and my mom, that I'll share about that exact process when the time is right, though. But it's a really funny story, really. Anyone else have any thoughts on that one, or we want to move on?
I mean, kind of like Charmaine was saying, like when you're in a place of like anger or frustration, you deal with things a lot differently. You know, when you stub your toe and it's like you're in that place of like pain and frustration, it's like you snap at little things. Whereas like if you're in a place of like, you know, gratitude and happiness or contentment or calmness, something little happens, you're like, yeah, whatever. Mm-hmm. So mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely how you think about things is everything.
There was a girl that worked on my team that was from Colombia, and she was coming back from Colombia once, and she got stopped, you know, going through customs and everything. And she was convinced it was because she had a Hispanic name. And actually she had some powdered white stuff. I don't know if it was sugar or whatever that she could only get in Colombia, but she was assuming it was all because she had a Hispanic name, not because she's bringing this powdered substance in from Colombia. But I mean, that's kind of the whole idea of, you know, when you're a hammer, everything's a nail, right? She's like making it into something else and not looking at the whole reality of the situation. It was about something totally different. And most of us reasonably can look and see why they would have stopped her.
You know what? I love that share. I love that share. And I'm just going to summarize my thoughts on this. Perception has infinite possibilities. There's about 1 million billion ways we can perceive anything. Okay. You can't always change a situation, but you can change how you look at the situation. And we create our reality with what we focus on. The secret strength of life is adjustment. To be the God of your own universe, because you get to decide what everything means to you. And a lot of times we create preferences for reality that aren't realistic. And that's part of our problem in the way we look at the problem. You know, I had a client say to me, you know, my biggest problem right now is that my kids don't listen to me. And I said, why is it a good thing they don't listen to you? He's like, they're learning to develop into independence. They're learning, they're learning things on their own time in their own way, which means when they learn it, they'll be more committed to the lesson than if it was just a truth that they nodded and accepted. And then he went into all these things. By the end of our conversation, he's like, you know what? It's a good thing they don't listen to me sometimes. And I said, there you go. Right. So now it won't stress them out. I'm like, they're going to do it anyway. They're not going to listen to you anyway. We might as well recontextualize it. Still do the thing you're going to do. Give them the heads up. But we might as well recontextualize it so it's not disempowering you during your day. Right? So ability to overcome all this stuff is in the mind. Problems, the whole source of problem is all in the mind. Right? So now let's go on to the next topic of conversation.
Brendan, I have one quick point to make. What I liked about Charmaine's idea about the hammer and the nail, it now gave me the idea that these stories from hell that we tell ourselves have certain fixed points and certain fixed aspects of it. Other things in that storyline might change. It might have sort of variety, but there just might be certain fixed points in that story. Like mine was that I'm never going to make money. I'm never going to have my own place. But although all things change around it, that theme stayed consistent in that story. So I'm wondering if these hell things that we create for ourselves have those certain fixed points that you can target to fix the story.
That's exactly, that's a great segue into what we're going to talk about next. To basically change the plot of the story, change the theme of the story. Let's do a quick check-in. Steve has just joined us. Perfect. I want to congratulate you, Steve, because everything you described, you're basically describing the evolution of Steve Smith, because now you are wiser. You have greater endurance. Suffering builds endurance. And you have greater capacity to help the people you care about. All because of this situation. Just like a workout gives you a burn, this experience has burned, but now you're stronger, man. So I just want to congratulate you on all of that stuff.
Stronger and wetter.
Yeah, seriously. So I had an epiphany this week about the meaning of sacrifice. And I think kind of in a spiritual or a religious context, we always think about sacrifice like it's giving up something for something better. But a lot of times, the word sacrifice, I think we tend to put like a negative connotation on it, or there's some negative emotions, or there's a pain, or those types of things associated with it. When in reality, we should be surely and willing to give up one thing for something better. And a lot of times we don't know what that something better is, so it's hard to do that. But my house is such a metaphor for sacrifice right now, because I can see the extended floor plan. I can see all the enhancements that are right there. So even though I just dumped a bunch of water, thankfully clean water this time, even though I dumped a bunch of water all over myself and I have to go inventory a bunch of parts and return stuff at Home Depot and probably redo about 30% of my plumbing, I get to see the house. I know what the trade-off is. And so everything, all the literal blood, sweat, and tears, because I keep hitting my head and cut my head open. Everything I'm doing, I see what the better is. And so my boys aren't so cheerful when I make them healthy. But for me, it's just really kind of driven home that, when we're asked to sacrifice something, I shouldn't have any type of negative connotation. I should just be willing to do it, whether it's God asking me to do it, whether it's me trading my time to help somebody else, like Brendan said. So that was my epiphany this week.
You know what else, Steve? For those of us who didn't build our own houses, the build quality is always questionable. You find all kinds of crazy things once you start cutting into walls. You know exactly what's in your house, and nobody cares about your house as much as you. Your house is going to be solid.
And you know what? A wise man named Joel Belmont once told me that suffering is in our perception of the facts.
Right.
Right?
Yeah. I like the sound of that.
Yeah. So let's go on to a group question now. In your opinion, I'm opening this up to just anyone who wants to answer. In your opinion, what are some ineffective ways that people handle their problems? Now, I'm going to give you some examples, right? Sometimes people wait it out and hope it gets better in time, so that the problem just diminishes to the point where it no longer affects them so deeply. and they think they passed this problem, but really they only outlasted it, right? So another thing is sometimes people will say just sleep on it, but just sleeping on it doesn't intentionally shift your focus to something more empowering. It just lengthens the interval of suffering and ignorance in some cases. Sometimes it might calm you down physically, but it's not the best way. Sometimes people might say, just look on the bright side. That can take you down the right path, but it doesn't take you very far. You often just come up with a surface level answer and that's it. And that's not very convincing. It's not very sufficient. It's like not taking an effective dose of a medicine. People might say, just let your mind go blank, like in meditation. And it's like, that's fine. That's one of the most common things people say. But when your mind comes back, your problem comes back with a fury. So you're just bypassing it, right? So there's a whole bunch of different ineffective solutions out there. What have you guys noticed are some of the things that just has some obvious limitations or flaws? Joel?
One word, blame.
Oh, yeah.
Blame others, blame a circumstance, blame the past. I mean, take your pick, but it's not my fault. It's somebody else's fault. Some other circumstance did this to me. And anyway, that seems to be a big challenge.
Anybody but me, right?
Right. Except that we're the only ones that can change things.
Hold on a second here, Joel. I don't think you can fairly say that. I mean, do the people who blame everyone else, aren't they the happiest people we know?
Depends on how you define happiness.
Right.
Great answer.
Everything's out of their control.
What else is an ineffective way? What way sucks?
You have mentioned, the head in the sand approach just doesn't work. You're in denial for so long and then, but the other thing that is a little bit different than that is not just flat out denying it, but just procrastinating on it. And I think maybe you alluded to that when you said sleep on it, but you continue to do that for so long and that problem, it'll outrun you.
Yeah.
I'll volunteer indecisiveness. That's kind of where I get stuck. I flip-flop back and forth between ideas and have trouble making a decision.
Yeah.
So my contractor, he's got my house, his father-in-law's house. He built the deck. So he runs into obstacles all the time. And especially where my house, like Charmaine said, it's an existing. So you run into obstacles that you didn't even know existed. And for him, he will go to sleep and wake up in the morning with the answer to overcome the obstacle. And he says this happens to him a lot. He'll go to sleep and he wakes up and he's like, oh, I know the answer. Like his brain figures it out in his sleep. His subconscious talks to his conscious, all that. And part of it is, he'll throw some brain power at it. And when it gets late at night and he's just tired, like we were doing my plumbing until 11 o'clock Saturday night and we had to just stop. Like we started at 8 a.m. It was too much. 15 hours was too much. But he wakes up the next morning and he has an answer to something else. So for him, he's found that to be a valuable tool where he'll just let his brain do its thing. But he's the exception, I believe, because a lot of people just go, whatever. And so, like Patty said, procrastination, if it's a minor thing, sometimes we can outlast it and you go, you know what? I'm not worried about that anymore. I'm stressed about the wrong things. But if it's like a real problem, like my car broke down, now I can't get to work anymore and I'm just not going to do anything about it, that's not going to go away. And, that has to be dealt with. Or, I lost my job. I've got to go find something else to replace that. But I think some people do seek out problems because that's their emotional home, and they like to live in that dumpster fire. I'm thinking of my daughter's mother-in-law. She seeks out problems just because she likes the drama and all that kind of stuff. And that's why she and my daughter are not getting along, is, you know, it's a dumpster fire, and most normal people don't operate that way.
You know, that's really cool. And what you're basically describing, I think, is a little bit different. I think what's happening is that this contractor is remembering what he already knows. And once he gives his subconscious, but he's not changing a disharmonious judgment about life or reality. So it's like, if he feels like that person should have never lied to me, in the morning, he'll still have those judgments, right? So it's kind of, I think it's an exception to the rule in that it's a little bit different than the common sources of suffering, but that it's a good point. It's a good point that in some cases, sometimes the answer to our problems is to remember something we already know. And sometimes we just got to relax our brain and let the problems bubble to the surface. Right.
Oh, he and I did curse the person that put down my flooring because they did not put the floor seams on joists. So we had to go in and frame a lot of boxes to support it, because literally they just put two boards together and nailed it into the air. So we were wishing we had a time machine to go find that person and give them a knuckle sandwich.
Okay, now I got a really good point on an ineffective way of handling problems. Number one is to judge something as bad. That is the number one ineffective way. And Joel brought up that story before. It's about like a guy, his son's going to there's a horse, and he gets the horse, and he finds a wild horse, but then his son breaks his leg. And then he thinks, oh, maybe it's a bad thing because my son broke his leg. But then the army comes and they were going to take his son, but not because he had a broken leg. So he's like, well, maybe it's a good thing. And it's like, yeah, every moment is connected to every other moment. And to call something bad is actually blind arrogance. And it comes from egotism. And so that is one of the first mistakes that creates suffering for us. That's going to sound so counterintuitive to so many people. So if you don't buy it, or it's a tough pill to swallow, that's cool. I think we're all trying to learn how to swallow that pill sometimes, right? But
I would say life is so much easier when you don't judge things.
Yeah.
As good or bad.
Trying to judge how something's supposed to be or supposed to get better. So many times we think our thoughts are correct because we thought them. Like, no, that's not supposed to happen like this. This guy shouldn't have screwed me over here and there. And that's what we think. And that is arrogance. And arrogance is such a, I hate saying that word because nobody wants to think of themselves as arrogant. And when I've done it before, it's like, oh no, that was arrogant. I don't really know. I don't know what I don't know, right? I know what I prefer. I can say, I prefer that didn't happen. I prefer I don't have to go through this experience. And we're always correct in that. But when we take our preferences for reality, and then we label them as realistic expectations of reality, that's where arrogance gets us. Now, let's go on to the next one.
Just real quick, I think, too, that whole thing of you take one thing and judge it or label it or whatever without the full context of what has happened before and what comes next. You know, I could take a 30-second video of something and I could put whatever spin I want on it if I'm not showing the full story and I don't know what comes next. So, you know, I was really praying that I passed my plumbing inspection, but I don't know what comes next. So if I get pissed off about it, there could very well be a very good reason that I'll learn in 18 hours, and then something else in 4 days, and then something else in 1 month. So that's a very good reminder to not take one event or one instance and try to label it.
Yeah. It's good. I have something I tell myself twice a day. I tell myself, I don't truly know what's good for me. Some things that I thought were a really good idea were a bad idea. And some things I thought were a bad idea turned out to be a good idea. And I don't know when the universe is cursing me or doing me a favor. Sometimes it seems like a curse is a blessing. It might be a dramatic interlude. This whole experience might be to set you up to have the skills to help your daughter out and create one of the most beautiful memories of her being loved by her dad and her dad helping her figure out the things that she couldn't figure out on her own. And you're just developing the skills to be the hero in an upcoming moment in life. We don't always know when we judge the moment, right?
Yeah.
What if it's all blessings and it just comes in different ways?
I think you're talking about the truth of reality, but are we really going to go there right now? Because that's like going from 0 to 100, Joel. Like, now I think you're describing my actual view of reality, is that it is nothing but blessings. Okay.
All nothing for us.
Now, and that's a deep conversation. We'll get into that someday, I'm sure. How are bad moods created? I want to ask you guys this, because bad moods are so central to suffering, right? How are they created? And if we can understand how they're created, then they don't have power over us as much. How are bad moods created?
Stacking. I think sometimes people, they don't usually get in a bad mood when they are completely neutral or positive and one little thing happens, but when a bunch of things happen and they stack up and we haven't either decompressed it or, processed it and moved on, when they stack up, we talk about that one thing that broke the camel's back. And really, that's the thing on the stack that's too heavy. If that thing hadn't happened, a lot of times you don't go to that bad mood. So for me, I've really tried to even eliminate the word mood since Tony Robbins and think of it as state and being in a positive state. And, because a mood almost has this connotation of, again, it's not my fault. It's something else. But if I can change my state and get rid of that negative stack, then I can keep in a peak or a positive state. And then for me, I've been able to control, this mood emotion much easier.
Excellent. Beautiful answer, right? Stacking these negative judgments, right? Which is, and I think there's a lot of passivity to that. We passively accept these default attitudes. I think that leads us to it. We shouldn't passively accept a default attitude of stacking negative judgments. We've basically surrendered our mind to bad philosophy, right? So I think that's definitely applicable. Who else has some thoughts on this?
You label it too. You say, I'm just having a bad day. And then suddenly it's the hammer and nail thing again. You're accepting everything as bad, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Anyone else? I think ineffective solutions to problems creates bad moods. So if you always blame others for your problems, eventually you get bad moods as a result, because you're applying an ineffective solution to problems. It doesn't fix your problems. So you get frustrated, and that increasing frustration creates bad moods. Also, not being able to understand the cause of our pain. When you don't understand the cause of your pain, but you keep experiencing it, that creates a bad mood. It's almost like a form of anger, right? Where we don't like what reality is dealing us. I think bad moods can also be a side effect of like hunger, and because our physiology can become our psychology. When our body isn't in a good state, it can be reflected in mood. I think listening to the wrong voice in our head, like listening to the little devil on your shoulder, like nobody should treat you that way, and this shouldn't happen to you, and you deserve better, and blah, blah, blah. That kind of stuff can do it. But most of all, I think disempowering focus. When you think what's bad about this, what's wrong about this, how can things get worse, who's to blame, all of those types of focus will create a bad mood, because ultimately we're deciding that reality should be different than it is. And when you indulge in a bad mood, you decide reality should be different than it is, then, to play off some of the stuff Joel said, from a spiritual level, It's like you're trying to rewrite the script of the creator. That's what your bad mood says. It says that the divine director's done a bad job. I can do better. Bad moods are a reflection of the same attitude that led the devil to being the devil. I can do it better. And that's what it's saying. Reality shouldn't be what it is. But it's only because you don't appreciate the skill of the divine director, which is a whole other skill in itself. Now, let me ask you this. Here's a question for everybody. Why are bad moods a bad idea?
Well, they color everything you look through. And briefly jumping backwards, I realized something that I was doing recently. When stuff happens, I'll ask, like, just in passing, like, why did this happen this way? Or like, why didn't this work out? And my wife pointed out that why questions aren't really helpful, because it's, again, the why is almost as questioning the creator in a sense, but it's like, it doesn't really solve anything. It's just like, well, how can I make this better? It would be a better question. Or how can I fix this? Or what's the next best thing that needs to happen?
Yeah. So you're betraying your higher objectives. Your objectives are probably to solve whatever's going on, and you're betraying that objective by indulging in a bad mood, because it cripples your problem solving capacity. Bad moods make us temporarily brain damaged. You only have about 30% of your creativity when you're in a bad mood, 30% of your judgment. Even your vision narrows when you're in a bad mood. You have just crippled yourself and become temporarily insane. I mean, you look at the demands of a person in a bad mood for justice, they're so irrational. Like, I need to kill that person and this and that. It's like, no, you're insane. You are actually insane right now. That's what happens. Bad moods are like vodka. It just does crazy things to people, right?
I think 30% is generous. I know with me, like, if I get in a bad mood, like, everything goes out, all common reason goes out the window, and it's just doesn't serve me.
Absolutely. Now, anyone else have any thoughts?
Yeah, I want to jump in here for a second, just from a medical perspective about bad moods, because, I've spent 21 years working with people who were injured at work and aren't going back, and they don't know it yet. That's why I'm being called in, because I'm working with their mindset as well as getting them to the places that they need to be in order to get as good as they can get in order to return to function. And most of the time they don't go back. I have an 88% success rate. It's one of the highest in the country, because I'm working with the mind, not just with the body. I believe healing starts here, right? And we all are in agreement with that. But when you're dealing with chronic pain, when you're dealing with a thyroid issue, when you're dealing with diabetes, when you're dealing with PMS, okay, it's easy to get in a bad mood, but it's also just as easy to stay out of it, because it happens up here. It's amazing if a woman is having her menstrual cycle or premenstrual cycle symptoms, but yet she has company coming over that night, and she can be great for 2 or 3 hours. And then as soon as the company leaves, she's, a mess again. So these are things that we can change our state in the moment. And once we stop asking why and start saying what's next, then we can get out of that pattern. So I never use why in my work. This is not a word that we use. We don't ask why. This is a fact. This is where we are. And how do we get from where we are to where we want to be? Where do we go from there? So I even think, and although this is not a popular stance in my industry, I believe that you can get over bad moods no matter what position that you're in, medical condition that you're in.
Only if you're as smart as Patty Baker.
Those people are in good hands. So I think you make a really good point, which is bad moods are a bad idea because it is always within your control. I actually do not feel that a bad mood is ever justified, ever. I think if people grasped all of reality, they'd realize that it creates a wretched disposition. It creates injustices on everybody around you. You know, as Yogananda once said, a bad mood is like throwing a skunk into the middle of the room. It stinks for everybody. It actually steeps you in selfishness. It makes you irrational, unpredictable. You say and do regrettable things.
Or like what's a scenario where a bad mood's ever made anything better?
I mean, people burn calories, I guess, when they're clenching up, right? Maybe that helps with weight loss to a minute.
It was a rhetorical question.
Yeah. I mean, John Milton described it as the despicable gift, because what you do is you shut out the ones you love best. And not only do you make yourself miserable, you cast a gloomy shadow over everybody you care about. It's the despicable gift. It is, you know, it's a bad way to get your point across. What you're saying is, you know, maybe it's like, okay, when has a bad mood made something better? Maybe you got your point across. It's a very low quality way to get a point across, right? Like, you know, life already has enough negativity in it. Why choose a bad mood and add more negativity to this life? Why? Don't you agree life already has enough negativity in it? Right? So, and most importantly, you can't help other people when you're in a bad mood. Nobody ever says so-and-so in a bad mood gave me a life-changing conversation and helped calm me down and gave me inner peace. And, you know, I had a spiritual experience because they were angry and yelling at me. No, nobody in a bad mood does anything except demand all kinds of craziness, right? So, anyone else have any thoughts on why a bad mood's a bad idea?
What's the antithesis? Like, how do you stay in that attitude of gratitude?
Well, I mean, we're going to get there. We're going to get there. I'll tell you how I've come to learn my truth on that.
Sorry, I always go for the jugular, but I know it's actually better to learn like what to avoid before you get to what to do.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. Why is it important that we take charge of the way we handle our problems? Because as much as we can all talk about how it makes sense, why is it important that we do this? Because a lot of people will still rely on their default mode and do what comes natural, right? So why is it important that we take charge of the way we handle our problems in life? Anyone have any thoughts? Joel.
I was just waving at Jen.
Hi, everyone.
Don't forget
to record. Great to have you here, Jen. So why is it important that we take charge of the way we handle our problems? I'll start off. Problems in life never stop. So this is like one of the master abilities and skills we can develop. This is our mission in life. Whatever your mission in life is, if you suck at handling problems, you won't be able to fulfill your mission unless
What's
you're here
the question again? What's the
question? Why is it important that we take charge of the way we handle our problems?
Oh, okay.
Rather than just doing what comes natural when problems show up in life.
If you don't handle them, they handle you.
Ooh, that was a good one. That was a quotable quote. Joel Belmont. Who else has a thought on it? I think it helps us develop our inner powers. Life was made difficult so that we can develop our inner powers of resourcefulness and patience and humility and how to love better and how to get over our indifference to wisdom, which is a major problem in life that people don't talk about.
So what you're saying is problems are the key to all progress and growth if we look at them correctly.
Yeah, and you might say that problems happen for us.
Yes.
There you go. Yeah, I think it's one of the most important factors in determining happiness. Because conditions are only good or bad depending on the attitude of your mind, right? As somebody said that somebody quoted Shakespeare, there's nothing good or bad, but thinking makes it so. Somebody threw that into the chat previously. But this helps you become a master of yourself, which makes you a real conqueror in life. It's those inner victories to be able to have the whole world at your command by the way that you look at all the stuff that doesn't go according to plan. Like, life success happens from the inside out, right? And this is why this is such an important skill to take seriously. It's the central part of your life. It's the most important. How you handle your problems is the most important factor in determining lasting success. Anybody can have like fool's mate success, right? Things just fall in your lap. But to be able to have sustainable success, you need to have a tight system for handling adversity. It needs to be simple, it needs to be repeatable, and it needs to be powerful. Because if you just default to whims and impulses and to taking advice from people that are more messed up than you, then it's just never going to be able to be a sustainable success. Right? And if you don't resolve your problems, they have an unrelenting grip on your life. Like, they got an octopus grip on you, all of your life problems, if you don't get good at overcoming them. Things that happened in the past that you need to recontextualize, that's still troubling you, and whatever it happens to be. And I think when we get good at this skill, it engages us with life with a deeper understanding, because then we can choose the optimal responses to any situation in life, right? True freedom is inward, not outward, straight up. Everybody's living it outside in, right? And Tony Robbins talked about this, and Joel went to UPW. He said, the quality of your life is the quality of your emotions, and the goals you want aren't really what you want. It's not really the money and the power and the relationships. It's the feelings they'll give you. All we really want is the inner stuff. So here's the next question. How can we be even better at taking charge of our thoughts? How can we be even better at it? Who has some thoughts?
I think you have to take action. I heard someone say once something about how do you get more confidence? And they said, you have to do something that impresses yourself. And so a lot of it is just, we talk about experimenting a lot here, but being willing to go out and take some kind of action, see what happens, evaluate what happens and continue to improve on it. But unless you're going out there and taking action and actually doing something, you're not really growing. It's all up here, but you don't really understand what the results would be. Yeah.
So mindset doesn't happen by accident, and it doesn't happen at a lower dosage of frequency and intensity. Everybody fails because I'll tell you, doing mental toughness coaching since 2003, people fail because they underestimate the effort or they overestimate their own ability. They will think that they can withstand negative influences, that they can watch movies that are embedded with disempowering thought suggestions and philosophies and disempowering music, and it won't affect them. That they can hang out with these people that are messed up because they're there to help them when those people are bringing them down. Like keeping poor company, justifying it that I'm doing this to help them when nothing's happening. You're just getting disempowered, right? So all great suggestions there. I think too, doing it daily, like, we have to live with an everyday awareness of the importance of this. Because the minute we allow a bad thought into our mind, that leads to bad actions, which leads to bad experiences and outcomes, and leads to your character and leads to your destiny. Like, those thoughts are the greatest point of leverage in your entire life experience. And that's why I think it's so critical to have such a high standard on all of those thoughts, and to not just accept the first thought that comes into your mind just because you thought it. Our best thoughts are contaminated with all kinds of junky, selfish preference bias and confused beliefs and everything, right? So, sorry, I went on a bit of a...
Stand guard at the door of your thought.
Yeah,
but we've absolutely talked about music and stuff here too. I know I have to be careful what music I listen to, because music's really powerful as far as feeding you. And if you pick, a song might sound really great, but if the words aren't necessarily great, you don't realize what you're meditating on, but that can feed and color your perceptions. And so Joel just went to UPW. Music was such a powerful piece of that, and it feeds in those positive ideas. So even if, you're not regularly thinking about, the different ways you react to something, if you're really always feeding yourself positive music, that can really have a big impact on the way you live your life.
Yeah, your mental diet.
Something I realized recently, just looking through Netflix, is how much content there is, it's focused on either like just really negative, like, I don't even know how to describe it. Just really negative movies and shows that are all about like people, like murder and death and like deceit and all these things. And you look at society and it's a reflection of, like that's what really, I mean, the market's driven by demand to some degrees, and it's hard for people to start demanding better things. But yeah, it's totally, I mean, music, movies, shows, whatever. It's like the more you feed it, the more that's the kind of stuff you're going to have in your own experience. Yeah. And I was going to mention too, for me, it's really, I'm finding more recently that it's really important to be careful of how I respond to things because my kids model me. And it's like, I'm teaching them how to respond to things. And so I have to, if I lose my cool, then they lose their cool with their siblings. And it's like, crap, I got to fix myself to fix this.
Yeah. Yeah. If your kids pick up the disease, if we have a bad way of handling adversity, it screws them up. Right. So it's like, it's a great motivator, by the way.
Wasn't there something in Tony Robbins too? Something about like you really are kind of modeled after the 5 people you're closest to. I mean, that's kind of your sphere of influence. And I know I was having a conversation with somebody the other day, and I didn't really understand what they meant. And I instinctively said, I understand the words you're saying, and I cannot tell you how many times he said that to me. But you do. You pick up other people's language, and you start reflecting it even without realizing it.
Yeah, it's true.
He's a big proponent of like trying to surround yourself with people that are closer to how you want to be. Because if you have people with lower expectations and you're trying to do things at a higher level, there's no comfort there. And so they either pull you down so that they're comfortable, or you lower yourself so that you're comfortable. So yeah, you only go as far as the expectations of your peer group.
I think a good way I would summarize that is to surround yourself with attitude and belief role models. Whose attitudes and beliefs do you want to role model? That's more important than any other form of role modeling, if you ask me. Right. And that's why it's good, because in the same way that you might have a song come up in your head that you haven't heard in forever, like Safety Dance by Men Without Hats, to be very specific, you might be like, why is that song coming up? I haven't heard that song in 12 years. I'm thinking of the little guys dancing around and the unicycle and whatever the craziness was in that video. Where the heck did that come from? And that's just the first random song that came to my head. I'm like, it's back in there in the subconscious. It's playing on a loop that we're not aware of. So we need to be careful of that mental diet. So I think a couple other things like on how to be, that's the one. Safety Dance. Totally. So I think some other things. Sorry, what was that?
DJ Patty Baker.
That was awesome. That was very timely. She was obviously just listening to it. She had it ready at the fingertip to hit play. That's her workout music. I think some of the things is that it's important to keep in mind. I've always had this rule that it's like, when something disturbs your inner peace, when you fumble, I treat inner peace like a football. If you fumble it, you got 60 seconds to recover the ball. Okay. I heard Tony talk about the same type of concept, and he says 90 seconds, which is cool, but he said, I give myself 90 seconds to indulge in a bad emotion, a suffering emotion. But the key is to not indulge in it longer. That's how we can be better at this. I think I will tell people, press pause on life until you put pen to paper and you write out, everything good, everything that can be learned, all the ways you can make it better, to process it and get clear on it. Press pause on life. Don't go out there and live with bad form because you fumbled your inner peace, right? Like, have that kind of a standard. Call on help if you need it. Like, who are your allies that you could just say, hey, can you help me see this problem better? I'm kind of stuck with this. I also think stick with the problem. Like, as Voltaire said, no problem can withstand the assault of sustained thinking. Try to think about it and reflect on all the ways to make it better and the empowering ways to look at it every day until it goes away. Another wise person once said, seek and ye shall find. You seek the answer to your problems, you'll find them eventually. I don't think we'd be created in an existence that had problems that could never be resolved. That wouldn't make sense, right? That wouldn't be the most intelligent thing. So I also think that if we're practicing mental toughness, I'm a big fan of putting pen to paper, writing things out, scheduling practice in your calendar. And we can talk about how that looks. It could look like this. I could give somebody a problem, hypothetically. I would say, okay, Steve, I want you to imagine that you have two good friends that both want you to visit their place at the same night. This is your problem. Now I want you to rep it out. What's good about this? What can be learned? How can you make it better? Right?
The first thing that can be learned is who's having what for dessert, so that I know, are we talking like cheesecake and carrot cake? Because carrot cake's an abomination, so automatically I know where I'm going.
Depends on the frosting, man. I mean, come on.
Dude, carrot cake, I love carrots. Carrot cake was invented by Satan himself. It is foul. So, yeah, right. I mean, that, you know, that could be a really kind of, you know, something like, you know, what do I do? I've got maybe two opposing people. Maybe I haven't seen either of them for a long time. It's been COVID. Maybe somebody's going through something. You know, tonight, in fact, we got an invite late last night to go see some friends, and we're pretty good friends with them, but they have had a lot of other friends kind of distance and separate based on, you know, political opinions and that kind of thing. And, you know, we're really kind of in line with them. And, you know, Angie's really kind of like, you know what? I need some new friends. You know, I've got people jumping ship on me. And so that's only one thing, but, you know, with all this crap going on, my wife says, hey, should I call and cancel? And I said, no, you know, I really think we need to go. You know, Angie is really kind of reaching out. You know, it's the second invite. They took us to the lake Memorial Day weekend. We spent the afternoon with them, had a great time. And I said, no, you know, we really need to go. I mean, I'm covered in nastiness. I got to go take a shower here in just a minute. But, you know, but something like that, sure. I mean, it could be two equally good choices, right? And it could be, you know, two people that are really, you know, kind of close or dear to me that I would want to see. And so, you know, how I don't know, really, I think I would maybe base my decision on, is there an extenuating circumstance or need from one party more than the other, you know, that I would need there? Or have I been trying to get together with one party more than the other and it never works out? You know, because those are two good things, right? And it's not necessarily, there's not a really a way better or a bad option. And so you're kind of, sometimes those are the most difficult choices too, right? Where you've got two equally good options and you're like, crap, which way do I go for that? So
perfect.
For me,
so
yeah, you know,
so here's how I might handle it. So that's the way that's your process. You just shared with us your process. Here's my process, as I would say, like, to practice this. I'd say, I'm going to go pen to paper right now. What's good about this? This is a good problem to have. I got two friends. What's good about it? They're in physical proximity. I can actually see them both. What's good about it? I'm doing some good things in my life to have friends and people who want to see me. What can be learned? Is there any time-sensitive issue? Or will they both be available on alternate days? Right. You know, what are they serving for dessert? I'm not eating any satanic carrot cake. Then I could say, how can I make it better? I could say, how can I make it better? I could be transparent with them and say, hey, here's the situation I'm in. I really care about you and your feelings. I just want you to know I've got this conflict right now. What's your thoughts on it? They might say, hey, you know what? Hang out with the other person. I'll get together with you on Friday. I'm free on Friday. We'll go fishing or something like that. Right. Absolutely. Or I might be like, why don't I bring the one friend over and maybe they'll make friends and they'll be new best friends and then it'll never be an issue. Right. So that's the way I would do it. I would go pen to paper, just like that, write it all out. And but I would do that every single day on different problems, because that skill, you can do it in the moment when it's relevant. Tony Robbins says everyone's majoring in minor things. People are more concerned about sports scores, sports stats, actor awards, stuff like that. This is profound knowledge. To be able to take life adversity and turn your pain into power in an intentional, strategic, effective, repeatable way is profound knowledge. How many people prioritize it? Hardly anybody. Nobody even talks about it. Nobody even has like a realistic, like, everybody talks about what a great concept it is, but they don't take it a step further into how can you practically apply it, right? And we'll talk about this a little bit more. I think this is part one of a two-part conversation, really.
I think for me, like, the pen to paper gets my brain engaged to where I have to start thinking, okay, are there other considerations? Are there other components of that? And instead of the one or two obvious that are right there, you know, what are all the considerations on it, and get my brain grinding on it so that I'm, you know, because our decisions are only as good as the information, right? We could make a terrible decision in hindsight with new information, but I try not to beat myself up anymore. If I look back and say I made the best decision I could with the available information at that time, there's nothing more that can be done, right? How the hell am I supposed to know the future? If I could do that, you guys would literally be at my new house, because I would be so rich. I would fly you guys all in on the Concorde that's not even in service anymore if I could see the future, right? So I can only do what I can do. And if I use all my information, but, you know, I love the pen to paper, because when I do that, it really gets my brain thinking, oh yeah, don't forget that, and there's this. So instead of a couple easy things that my brain grabs, it makes me think the whole thing through with a little more depth.
There you go. Yes, that is the standard.
Taking a step backwards, like, Brandon Zaw is the ninja, and this is really kind of, I don't know, just a genius thing to have a concept of, like, who does that? Who takes time to just, like, proactively go through problem scenarios? I was trying to think, like, who else would do that? Maybe like in an AA meeting, they might say, like, okay, you might end up in this scenario. What are you going to do? Or they might do it in, like, you know, football strategic practice, thinking about playing the Super Bowl, like, here, it could go down this way, and what are we going to do if that happens? But nobody just takes, like, day-to-day problems, like, okay, my kids are going to say this, like, how am I going to handle it? Like, that's really kind of smart, because then you're not really, at least you have some prep going into it, and you're not just caught off guard.
Yeah. And there are a finite number of human problems. And if you get good, every time you get good at them, you have immunity to them. And Patty, go ahead. I'm sorry, I keep cutting you off.
Colonel John Boyd was a U.S. Air Force fighter pilot, and he had something called the OODA loop, which is something that I use as a practice. And basically it's failing forward fast. And so what you're doing is determining what the problem is, observing it. What are the goods? What are the bads? What do we need to learn from this? What are the risks in it? And good, bad, neutral, whatever. And then orient yourself where you're going to have to pivot, right? And do you need more time? Do you need more resources? What do you need? Reorient yourself, and then decide, make a decision as quick as you can. What is going to be your next step? And then act on it. And once you decide and then you act fast, then what's going to happen is you're going to make the next move and then stop and do it again. And so this is something that you can write down. I have all my patients write it down, do the OODA loop, because now they're trying to determine how are they going to get back to work? What are they going to do for money? How are they providing for their families? So by doing this allows them this exercise mentally that they're now back in control of their life, so to speak.
Love it. Thank you.
He must have studied with Brandon. He said he must have studied with Brandon. It's a lot of the good genius of what's good about this.
So why don't we continue this conversation next week? Because I only got us halfway through what I was supposed to take us through today, but that's only because it was just such a big conversation, right? But basically, I would say that this is one of the most important conversations we can ever have, because the way you handle adversity shapes so much of your emotional destiny, your spiritual destiny, your mental, physical destiny, everything. And if you don't optimize that, then you're never going to self-realize, right? So why don't we go around the circle and everyone just says key takeaways from tonight? Key takeaways. Charmaine, why don't you go first?
Well, something I was thinking of when you were talking about the example of having two friends inviting you over the same night, I loved the idea of just laying it out there in front of one or both of your friends and just telling them, hey, here's this problem I have. And I don't know why we don't think to do that, because it's just like you were talking about before.
You don't put pen to paper.
We don't know what's good for us. We don't know what's good for someone else either. And usually people are very generous. When you lay that out in front of them, a lot of times, people will be like, oh, no problem. And they can rearrange. But we can we can look at it ourselves and think, oh, this is the worst thing ever. I can't go. They're having this thing. And we create all these problems that they may not even necessarily see. So I like the idea of just being open with people and being able to bring it to them and discuss things openly. And I think that can be a superpower.
And that can always be for how can you make it better for any problem? That can be like that's a solution that it can apply across the board to so many problems. Hey, I want to tell you about the conflict I'm in, and just share it with them, because it builds trust. It also builds their cooperation with the choice, because you got them involved in it. And a lot of times, just to make it easier for you, they'll make a sacrifice. They'll be like, hey, look, go visit that other friend. I'll figure something out. And then there's no hard feelings because you involve them in the process. And
it builds rapport.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally.
And you didn't make the decision for them or determine what the meaning would be for them.
Yeah, because we don't know what's best.
Yeah.
Crowdsource it.
Love it. Jen, key takeaways.
Well, definitely pen to paper. I think we've talked about that before, just journaling, the power and actually doing that. Being involved with it and creating the time, right? So to be immune to all the problems that exist, the infinite problems, it's a skill. So treat it as a mental toughness, exercise for ourselves.
Yeah. And it's such a big deal. We put pen to paper on so many other things, like our groceries, we plan our vacations, but we never actually hold that standard to everything that shakes our inner peace. Mm-hmm. And I believe we absolutely should, if we want to get what we really want in life. That if you want to just be able to maintain your inner peace all the time, you need to just master this, because it's a major thing. But nobody talks about it, right? Okay, Chris, can you hear us? I'm not sure if Chris is there.
Yes, sir. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. We can hear you. Key takeaways from tonight.
You're breaking up.
Chris, we're having trouble hearing you. And you're breaking up. So what I'm going to say is this, Chris. Can you type it into the chat? Type your key takeaways into the chat, and I'll read them out for everybody. Because we're not getting much audio at all. We got a few things here and there. But we love you anyways, brother, and we want to hear what you have to say. So if you want to type it in. Okay, key takeaways. Why don't we go, Steve, key takeaways.
My key, just making sure I'm not muted. My key takeaway is I don't know what's good for me.
You know what, man? That is
I got sticky notes all over my laptop.
Buddy, I tell myself that twice a day. That's so powerful. If we do humility hygiene, I'll tell you guys the 5 things I tell myself every day. And if you want to role model some of those attitudes and beliefs, all the power to you. But these are the things I've deemed in my humble life experience that are so critical to just, but yeah. And I think that's a beautiful one. If you can internalize that one, I can tell you that you'll have so much more peace in life.
Yeah.
So love it. Love it. I mean, I'm being attacked by mosquitoes right now. I'll go next. I'm being attacked by mosquitoes right now, but I don't know what's good for me. And a lot of people will judge mosquitoes as bad. And I would say this. I would say that mosquitoes make this reality imperfect. It makes this reality kind of unpleasurable at times. And that's a good thing. So we don't get too attached to this and forget about the ultimate reality that lies beyond this. Because as imperfect as this world and reality is, everyone's already got spiritual amnesia. So we need things like mosquitoes and stuff so we don't get too attached to this reality. Thank you, mosquitoes.
That's a tough one for me to swallow.
Yeah, but there you go. That's a recontextualization.
But good job making the best out of it.
Yeah, exactly. And because we don't know what's good for us, there was a time when DDT was used to kill mosquitoes because they thought they were all bad. And it led to a decrease in fish and bird and frog population. And all the fishermen suffered. The very people that wanted to get rid of the mosquitoes. It killed their livelihood. They had no idea, right? Okay, Patty Baker, before I'm gonna read Chris's answers. Chris said that thinking about the power of the internal world. Yes, everything is going on inside. Everything. Think about that. Everything you're even seeing and hearing right now is actually just going on inside you, like a film projector. Patty Baker, over to you.
It's hard just to come up with one thing. You just brought such good content tonight, Brendan. Thank you so much. I mean, I love this, and I love you. So thanks for that. Blind arrogance, which is egotism. That was my takeaway. I could never put words to what I was observing or what I was experiencing, but that's it. And so that helped me.
Oh, thank you. And thank you for the kind words. I will receive them on behalf of those who've done a successful job so I could be successful, including all those people who shaped me into being and contributed and supported me in my journey and all the goodness that has worked through me. So thank you very much for that. All right, over to Joel.
It helps me to know that there's only one ego. There's one divine ego. And we can only express that. My big takeaway is that I need to work more on my this muscle of developing a proactive approach to it. Because you're right, nobody does that. And how important is that? Like, that's everything. And how you respond, because you can't control what happens to you. You can only control how you respond to it. And none of us like hone that skill. I mean, well, none of us, you do, but not very many people hone that skill. And that's a tremendous skill to have. So I was making a list today of things I need to set alarms for, like, you know, because life just kind of passes by, and I want to have like a game night with my kids because we're huge into board games, or music night where we play instruments, or, you know, just have these fun little things. And so, you know, why not have a night with, you know, with my wife or something where we just go through challenges and like, how would you respond to this? Especially with kids, it's, you know, it's like you're constantly having to readjust your approach because one that worked last week doesn't work this week.
Love it. Love it. You reminded me of the story to finish about the trip on the lake. So today I went on a paddleboard trip. I was on a paddleboard and my mom was on a kayak, and it looked like a good idea to go to the other side of the lake. It looked nice and calm, and a massive wind picked up, and we had the biggest waves I've ever seen. We had to go along the shoreline, and I'm getting rocked like this, almost falling into the lake. I'm like, this is ridiculous. Like, we've never seen it. It came out of nowhere, right? We had to stop on the shore, like at this forest and rocks. We had to we just got to shore ourselves here. And then we tried to go again, and I couldn't even move. Like, I'm fighting these massive waves, and we had to hang out on the shoreline. And then I said, okay, stop. What's good about this? And we're hanging out. She's sitting on a tree. I'm sitting on a rock. I'm like, you know, we're in this together. Like, it's not really that big of a deal because civilization's kind of close, right? Like, if there's a serious emergency, we got our life jackets. Like, you know, we got I'm like, this problem can only last 24 hours because, you know, at 5 a.m. the lake is always calm. So, you know, and she's like, and my mom's like, well, I'd prefer not to sleep outside because then there'll be animals. I'm like, the animals would be a good thing. I would play with them. I'd be like, I never had a chance to play with these animals. Like, if they show up, I'm all in, right? So, and then we were all like, well, what can we do about it? And I'm like, well, we can figure out what's our plans. Like, do we try to get to this point or that point, and what can be learned? And I was like, oh, I forgot to mention, the neighbor mentioned there's a tornado warning. And then we're like, so it can probably get a lot worse because the clouds rolling in. And I'm like, so we need to act fast because we don't want to be here during a tornado. Like, so I decide I'm going to like try to straddle, like sit straddling on my paddle board and go. And I thought that would be the plan. And then I said to my mom, I said, you know, how stressed out are you right now on a scale of 1 to 10? She said 4 out of 10 because of the tornado warning. And then she's like, well, what are you? I'm like, I'm a 0 out of 10. And she's like, how can you be a 0 out of 10 in this moment? And I said, because I'm keenly aware that God is loving, God is intelligent, and God is in charge. And so I don't care. I don't know how this is going to work out. Right. But I don't care. Like, I'm 0, right? Like, I'm like, it's a cool plot twist. I'm like, if I could predict how this was going to work out, it'd be interesting. Right. Like, it wouldn't be as interesting. So as it ended up turning out, I had to like, I tried to like side straddle this paddleboard. We waited till we got an opening. Then I had to like kneel and paddle. And then I realized, like, in that moment, when we allow ourselves to get stressed out, the degree to which you can get stressed out on a scale of 1 to 10 is the exact degree to which you have an opportunity to have greater faith. Because if you actually have great faith, you will be 0 out of 10 all the time. And every time there's even 1, 2 out of 10, that is your lack of faith right there. Right? Like, that is actually a mental toughness test. And I'd be like, and then I remember my mom said she was a 4. And I said, well, why are you a 4? She's like, well, the tornado could come. And I'm like, so you think there's an exception to the rule of having total faith in the creator? That's what you've told me. You've told me there's an exception to the rule in having that total faith. That I'm like, the tornado could happen. That'd make a better story. Right? I'm like, if the tornado could happen, I'm running into the woods. I'm like, this is going to get super interesting. I don't know what the creator's doing now. Right? Like, I don't care. Like I said, this isn't the ultimate reality. Right? So we shouldn't treat it as such. Anyways, that's the story to finish off today's session. I thought you all did an amazing job. Let's do a go team on 3 fist bump and we're out. Okay.
Can I fist bump one of the mosquitoes coming to your screen?
Yeah, I know. I think I've eaten about 12 of them for dinner tonight. Like, honest to God. So, go team on 3. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. Go team.
Go team. Go team. I love you guys.